So tonight, our guest is Michael Horn, North American representative for the world-famous Plejaren contact case of Billy Meier from Switzerland. Michael will be reviewing some of the more important aspects of Billy's lifetime contact and, more importantly, his prophecies. If you'll please welcome Michael Horn.
Thank you. You know, when you spoke about an anniversary, I suddenly was reminded that in 1986, there used to be a cafe up here called the Sunflower Cafe on 89A somewhere. I don't know if anybody remembers it. You do? Oh, okay. And it was in that cafe that in 1986, I met somebody who told me they had all of the contact reports, the notes and conversations that Billy Meier had up, well, between 1975 and 78 with the Plejarens. And when I was invited then back when I was in LA to go up to Decker Canyon where this guy lived and to get this big bunch of 1,800 pages, single-sided and all that. And indeed I did. And that began the next phase for me in studying and getting introduced to the material in this case. Now, I don't know how many people have actually looked at the flyer invitation and understood that this is going to probably be fairly controversial for some people. And I don't ask you to believe anything here. I simply want to present information, point of view, etc., etc. And we hopefully will have a little time at the end of this, if there's questions, challenges, what have you. So as you can see here, it's titled The Time Traveler's, The Time Traveler's Vision of Our Future. And this is one of Billy Meier's over 1,200 clear, still irreproducible, primarily daytime but not exclusively, photos of UFOs. We'll come back to that, but here's the question. Here is the question. And as I said, because I received all this information that forwarded me on what is now a 40-year project of research and investigation, this is a very important question. Because a lot of people have either accepted this idea, rejected it, etc. And again, there's nothing to believe. We're going to try to address some of it. And what is important to look at here is, you know, the idea about the confirmed existence of extraterrestrial life. That would really be the single most important, as far as I'm concerned, discovery, event, whatever, in all of science and human history. But that would be exceeded by the confirmed contact between extraterrestrials and the people of Earth, or someone on Earth. So what we're going to look at first is the criteria that is used to determine the truth. That's going to set, the truth sets itself apart from beliefs and from unsubstantiated claims and vagaries and mysteries. And that is the quantity and, of course, the quality of the evidence. And Joe's giving me a signal.
The wire. Watch the wire.
Watch the wire. Oh. Is it going to do something? Oh, I see. All right. So we're going to go first to 1964. We're going to travel back in time, all right, before we go forward in time. We're going to go back to 1964, what's called the foundational evidence in this case. And I'll use the word right now only once, alleged. So what that means, alleged extraterrestrials, alleged time travel, alleged this and that, and present the information that you, should you choose to, will use to determine whether something is true as far as you're concerned or not. This is one of the people, one of the human beings that Billy Meier was tutored by. And her name is Asket, and she was a time traveler, physical person. But the time travel element becomes important in this a little later on in the presentation. In 1964, Billy Meier began to take his first photographs of UFOs. Now you can see that in this and some of the subsequent ones, we're talking about a physical object in an environment. This is India, when Meier was studying Buddhism at the Ashoka Ashram in Murali, India. And this particular object, this craft, we're told, is one of several craft in the contingency of people who worked with this woman, Asket, in the early years with Billy. She was the primary contactee with Billy for an 11-year period. And this was part of the photo ops when he was in India And some of these are sepia tone and all. These are taken with a very primitive camera. It's a 35mm camera. And this is a little bit more of what we're used to seeing with UFO photos, especially from any time in the past. That means what we would call lights in the sky. If you see down here on the right-hand side, there's a silhouette of a woman. She was a woman who was working with kind of as a nanny for this young girl at the time, 10 or 12 years old at that time, Po Cheng. Now, this photo is a bit different. And what you're looking at here is a photograph that when I was making a film with my filmmaking partner back in 2006, we were with Billy and he opened up this whole album for us. And that object in the sky, that cross-like figure in the sky, is not painted in, it's not adhesive tape, it was photographed in the sky. And when you look closely at it, you can see the clouds in some parts seem to be coming a little bit through it or behind it. That is Billy sitting in the forefront. And in my opinion, there is some symbology here that's important to the whole story of who Billy is and why this mission. But for now, let's just proceed through some of this evidence. These photographs were taken, as I said, with a very kind of a primitive camera. It was a 1940 Kodak bellows type camera. My father had one. You were lucky if you can get regular photographs. These were nothing was special effects back when Billy was taking photographs. And with this thing, it's like you roll it out and there you go. So this article appeared in 1964 in the Statesman newspaper, published in Delhi, India. And it's a very important article for a number of reasons. The author of this article, the reporter who did this, met young Edward Albert Meier. He was not yet called Billy at this time. And he found him, Meier was like a vagabond. He had been traveling over tens of thousands of miles around the world, hitchhiking and doing different things, and studying, pardon me, the major religions and what have you. He was in India studying Buddhism. In this article, the reporter describes some of the 80 photographs that Meier had in an album of UFOs. You've just seen a number of them, including the cross in the sky. He saw that photograph, 1964, he's looking at it. Same one that was sitting in that album. Now, Po Cheng, who was an eyewitness to many of these events in India in 1964, went on after she grew up. Here she is with her grandfather, who was the head monk at this ashram with her brother. And after she grew up, she became the ambassador for Cambodia to the United Nations General Assembly for 12 years. She was and is a real person, not a myth or anything herself. And that's kind of important because she would ultimately come forward. We'll get to that. But she started to come forward and give up her anonymity at a certain point because of this case. So in India, we had, as you see here, 80 original photos. They were seen and described to the reporter. There's 11 of those photos still existing, including the cross in the sky, and still living credible eyewitnesses. Po Cheng, in the 1990s, she came forward and she gave a presentation at the, I think it was the International UFO Congress at the time, and she attested to the story that this man, Billy Meier, was telling. She had been contacted by friends of hers who said something about, well, weren't you at this ashram? We've heard about this man, Billy Meier. And she, okay, I guess I have to come forward and start talking about this, along with another woman, who, an Indian woman as well, who was a friend of Pobel's. They came forward at this event. There's a whole video on this that is available online. And she described the whole situation. There's a photograph in the background that we've seen just moments ago, one of the versions of it. So here's Pobel in 2000 in New York City. And she also goes and she visits Meier in 2000, 36 years later. And they spend all this time talking and reminiscing and reliving these times because Pobel was one of about 100 people who'd seen not only Meier at the ashram, they're seeing the ships and they're seeing Asket walking around with him. So she goes back also, if this works, to India in 2000 and revisits the ashram. And so there's all this material is online. You can look this up. Now, this question is important because we kind of take for granted that anything we see, oh, UFOs, well, it's all real, it's all extraterrestrial. These are not photographs of secret military craft. These photographs, starting with this one, these are from 1975 on. We will ultimately have like a 6-year period in which Meier is taking UFO photos. You can see there's dissimilar metals. There's sculpted flanging and cupola with a thing on top. And then this was one of a series of about 9 photos where Meier had the photo op to sit up on a hillside, and they said, okay, we're going to move our ship around the tree, take photographs. You can see the reflection of the tree and sometimes the sky. So we're not looking at miniatures. We've actually had forestry experts examine trees in Meier's photographs, and they were told, forget about the big object, focus on the trees. Can you identify those trees? Are they miniatures? Are they models? And in every case, what we're told is, well, these are real trees. We know the species. We know why it's real and not a model, etc. So this has been delved into in great detail for quite some time in terms of looking at and analyzing Meier's evidence. To date, nobody has taken photographic and other evidence that is as clear and that technically remains still irreproducible, that has been determined to not be models, special effects, anything like that. So we're asking this question about a man. We're saying, well, Billy Meier, some people say he's a hoaxer. Some people say he's the only authentic UFO contactee. What is that going to mean by the time we get through all this stuff? There it is again. Another angle. All right. Now, of course, Meier took photographs with up to 3 of the craft in them. This is a still from a film where these craft are hovering and then 2 of them disappear and 1 remains in the center. Meier took photos, a couple of photos from inside the craft hovering over Switzerland. He's in a craft. Here's one next to him, and there's one in the distance. And here is the other one. Now, let's see if this... He zooms in with an 8mm film camera in 1976. Watch for lights like that and that. Right? Goes back. There it is again. It's not a model. Nobody had a remote-controlled model with flashing lights from... There it is. Okay, Billy Meier puts this out. And one more time. And there we go. Okay. Now, this is the famous pendulum craft film, Watch the Top of the Tree. Because people, of course, said, well, it's got to be a model on a long string, which would have been impossible to control anyhow. But you may notice that the top of the tree, when they go to a certain place, the top of the tree moves because there's a backwash, not a model. State-of-the-art analyses have been done for 36 years on a variety of the evidence, as I say, about 4 or 5 categories of evidence that we've had. And we have this online. All of the analysis that's here, this is just, of course, the first page, and if you look back at the first date, it's 78. And when the analysis was done using state-of-the-art contemporary technology in 2014, okay, 36 years later, it was found that in one of the frames, the craft is in 2 places at the same time in one frame. Not a model. This, of course, ups the ante because everybody goes nuts and says, well, that's obviously got to be a model and a miniature tree. But Billy has 64 photos of this craft and a video. We're not going to show the video. It's on my website. They moved it around next to different trees. We closed up and close to it. And then they set it down in his front yard so that he could be 15 feet away from it to take photographs of it. These are not lights in the sky. You look at there's blue, green, red crystals. There's 100 different crystals all around the thing. We don't know the reason for it. And if you look at this, these inside of these circles there's blue lenses, and we can guess on it. Now, when Billy released this photograph, people said, oh, that's an orange model against a black curtain. It's obvious. He's hoaxing again. And here you can see all these little things here. Meier has one hand. He doesn't have a metallurgy shop. I've been to Switzerland 19 times. There's no metallurgy shop. Now, you start to look more closely, the reflection on the thing. This is all from the same photograph. And then you know, some of the details may not come through as clearly as we might like here, but there's plenty of detail on this thing. Okay, so here it is. Now, when an analysis was done on this, the photographic expert who did it decided to take this photograph and put it into Photoshop and up the contrast, lower the brightness, or the reverse, whatever that was. And this is what happened. Now we see, and it's clearer when it's online, but there's a gravel road, there's a grassy hillside, there's one of those marker posts that are about a meter high, and there's an energetic aura around this object. It's no longer simply a quote-unquote gold model against a black curtain. It's outside. A guy in Hong Kong did the same thing, and he played with the contrast, and suddenly we are now looking at how did Billy Meier in 1981 foresee that contemporary technology, figure out what it would be and how to hoax it if he put a 35 millimeter photograph up online that people would drop into Photoshop. He's going to figure out how to make it look like it's hovering over a road. We had a 15-second exposure of this in Times Square when I took out a press release about something. Came with the package. They said, well, you can have photograph. I said, good, put this up. You know, New York City, nobody's going to pay any attention, but it's okay because, you know, it could set down in Times Square. They wouldn't do anything with it. But here was the analysis that was done on this. It's a whole, I think it's something like 74 pages. And all of the software, all of the technology, state-of-the-art technology used, all the protocols, all listed. You can go through it and duplicate. You can use the scientific method. You can take the different photos and do what he did and see if you get the same results. And I will tell you with this circled thing here, so much was discovered about the reflections in those globes of an object that was behind the photographer, who was Billy, because there's a carriage house back there. So everything, the more you get into and you start to strip everything away, it's all consistent. There's nothing that screams out hoax. Then you get to a thing like this, the light ship or the energy ship. And Billy took a few photographs of this. I'll only show you a couple of them. But he was told by the Plejaren that this, and when this came in, it was changing shape. It was a globe, it was a streak, it was this luminescent bathtub-looking thing. And he was told these are beings from the Andromeda Galaxy. They are semi-physical, semi-material. They're basically energetic. Meier could not communicate with them, and he just took the photos. And in the analysis, we're, you know, as you can see, this has changed. It's gotten, you know, higher. And then these are other elements around it, but just to show you. So this is some of the photographic evidence. Then there was a man named Marcel Vogel. Some of you may know about Marcel Vogel. He was an expert in crystals, among other things, and he did a lot of work. Marcel Vogel was a research chemist at IBM. He wasn't just, you know, someone from Sedona doing crystals. He was adding to the whole compendium of knowledge about what you could do with crystals. And he was quite a character. Scientifically, he was a patent holder on lots of stuff. There, and here, and there, and more. So Vogel was testing things. And what I've bolded on some of these slides are some of the quotes from him about his experience. This is also on a videotape that was produced by Wendell Stevens, Lee, and Britt Elders, who did a wonderful trilogy of things, plus a film called Contact. Just great. They brought this to the world. We wouldn't know about this if it hadn't been from them, and they're all Arizona residents as well. Wendell's no longer with us, but Lee and Britt live up north. So you have him talking about the phenomenon that was occurring and what he was able to identify, and he's using X-ray diffraction, spectral analysis, blah-de-blah-blah. You're talking about Billy Meier, the one-armed Swiss farmer up there who isn't exactly putting things together, you know, metals and what have you, but it goes beyond that. Vogel says a whole lot of stuff about what he was looking at. And if you do want to look online at the article about this, this was also included in the book Light Years by Gary Kinder. And then we have his conclusion. Now, of course, since Vogel came, you know, when he came forward and basically said, you know, I can't put this together as a scientist. Well, of course, people attacked him. They said, well, he worked with crystals. Well, people made radios with crystals too. I don't know why they attacked him. So there were sound recordings as well. On 4 occasions, Meier and a number of people were outside, and he was using an Iowa, I think, tape recorder. They made sound recordings, and on one occasion, the sounds were so loud that people came from 4 kilometers away to try and figure out what these booming sounds were. They had something like 28 distinct sounds with overtones, about 32 separate sounds were detected, or it was 24 sounds and 32 with the overtones, whatever. And they were tested in 4 different studios. One studio, Excalibur in LA, I had been in that studio years ago, but the most interesting thing was, there's Excalibur. Nils Ragnerud, he comes to different events and makes presentations of things, sound engineer, but they took it to the Naval Undersea Lab in Groton, Connecticut, and they have a complete sound bank of virtually any and every sound source. Automobiles, birds, planes, the whole thing. They could not identify the sounds. They identified an airplane that passed during the time that Meier was recording. There was a plane in the area, and they could pick up the sound of the plane, and they were able to identify the engine of the whole thing. They said, well, but we can't identify that source. There were lots of people that came out for some of these recordings, including undercover policemen. So Billy didn't have a speaker set up that could draw people from, you know, 4 kilometers away. Then we have the handprints of the Trilliner. So here's a little setup so you understand this. It is said that the Plejaren people have a monitoring that goes on through small monitoring craft around the world, and especially around the center in Switzerland. And sometimes some of the Plejaren in pairs will be also monitoring from a craft. Well, they went on some kind of vacation, and another race that they deal with, little people called the Trilliner, decided they would take over for the Plejaren for whatever the number of days or nights it was. And they also decided they would leave a little memento so that Billy would have something to remember them by. In 2006, I was contacted by a group in London wanting to interview Meier. So I said, well, I'm going to be over there. And Billy said yes. So we went over, and they were going to interview Billy for 15 minutes. And about an hour and a half into the interview, someone came in the office and said, well, Billy, why don't you show him the car? So, oh yeah, we'll go out there. So that's Billy's right hand there. He doesn't have a left hand. What you're seeing here, from here to here, is from here to here, then the hand, wrist, and then the fingers. If you count them out, there's 7 distinct prints there. Now, when you go up close to that and you look, the papillary lines, they're etched into the finish of the car. This isn't something that was painted on, and by the time I was there to see it, they'd already been etched into the car for a few seasons. They lasted at least 4 years. This was the little Subaru of his stepson, and they've also put the handprints on other cars too, just to have fun. But there you can see, there's a, you know, so the story goes that these are people who, from another system. They're human, but they're smaller in stature than we are for the most part. They have a light green tinged skin and 7 digits. And they decided to have a little fun with Billy and the folks there. Nobody who apparently objected too much. Now, one of the interesting things, of course, was that I had, at that time, Linda Moulton Howe had contacted me about that. Oh, can we bring scientists to see this? And Billy said, yes, just don't destroy the cars. But of course, Linda was busy with mutilated cattle and whatever, you know, very moving experience here. Okay, so then we have a United States Air Force Office of Special Investigation expert. Here's the story. About 2 years ago last month, on a Saturday morning, my phone rings out of nowhere. You know, it's Michael Horn. Yeah, my name's Gerald. Yeah, okay, I'm an investigator. Yeah, this Billy Meier case, I think it could be a hoax. You willing to talk about it? I said, yeah, sure. You know, like we haven't heard that before. But so Joe doesn't tell me much more, except if I'm willing to talk to him, he'll call me with questions. And so for about 3 months, we go back and forth and back and forth. Some of the things I can see he's not too happy about. Other things, okay, kind of gruff guy. All right. So in August of that year, I hear from Joe again. And Joe says, let me tell you who I am, and then I'll tell you about your Billy Meier case, you know, kind of a back east kind of a thing. And I said, okay, who are you? And he said, well, I was the top investigator for the United States Air Force Office of Special Investigation from 65 to 71. I'm not into UFOs, but I came upon this, and I've done a lot of, I've personally vetted hundreds of people. That means people who were aspiring to higher office, people who in the military, people running for, yet a higher office, moles and spies. Office of Special Investigation is there to serve to protect the people of the United States. You know, we could have people who are applying, who already in the military, who might want to run for president, or not in the military. They could end up with their finger in a nuke. I said, okay, I get it, Joe. He says, don't take my word for it. Check your email. Sends me photographs of all of his letters of recommendation and everything. The guy's for real. They're raving about this investigator. I said, well, you seem like an accomplished fellow. He's, all right, so he comes at me as a skeptic. And then he says, look, I decided to apply the methodology that I use in did when I was working with the service to vet people, to investigate. You go through the means, you go through the motive, you go through the opportunity. He says, look, I'm going to give you an example. He said, let's just say somebody gets murdered and there's a wallet on the ground. There's a gun and somebody says, oh yeah, the guy connected to that wallet and that gun, he was here, I saw him. Slam dunk, says Joe, except for one thing. Somebody's got a video of him 1,000 miles away at a wedding at that time, time and date stamped, and real eyewitnesses, hotel reservation, he was there. He says, I don't care what that other evidence is. Throw it out. This guy didn't do it. Somebody else did it. I said, okay. So he said, you know, I went and I analyzed that 1964 evidence that you got. You remember it, I showed you this, right? And I showed you that. Okay. So he says, look, your Meier case is 100% ironclad authentic. I will take on any skeptic. Says otherwise. I said, really? And he did. As a matter of fact, he took on someone you might know, Kevin Randall. Some people know him. And another guy in India who's been kind of attacking the case. And he says, I don't know how you can talk to these people. They don't know how to think. And they don't understand investigation and methodology. I said, okay, I'm with you on that. He said, look, I even checked out Po Bo Cheng, her history with the UN, real person, all checks out. I watched every video I could get online of Billy Meier. He's the most honest person I've ever seen. He says, now look, I'm telling you, I vetted hundreds of people. I sat there with him. He's the most honest human being I've ever seen. So I said, I'm with you. Okay, so we go through all of that. And I recently was in touch with Joe just a couple days ago because of another thing that we'll get to. But we come back to this whole premise of mine. Confirmed existence of extraterrestrial life. And then we get to the idea that it's only going to be the contact between somebody on Earth, and that ups the whole ante. You know, everybody, this is why I say, and this is sensitive for people who've been following this UFO case and that UFO case and every claim under the sun. Well, who has any evidence? But this doesn't exist so that we can run around chasing lights in the sky or to create careers for so-called UFO experts. You know, I've had 7 UFO sightings. My first ones were here in Sedona. And I'm satisfied that those are secret military craft from this area, or from Camp Navajo or whatever, and I have reason for that statement. I won't get into that, it's not that important. But the reason for it isn't that. It's so that we'll discover the truth. And that can often be really harsh in any aspect of life. When we've got a certain cosmology, when we have a belief, when we're attached to something, well, hopes, and then we get hit with the truth that doesn't seem to coincide with whatever that we've carried forward for how many, every weeks, months, years, or whatever. So we come, well, who is this guy? Who's Billy Meier? You know, we just hear Swiss guy, hoaxer, one arm, whatever. Well, let's see, we might be able to hear from him here.
Mijn naam is Eduard Albert Meier.
I don't think we're hearing the other track.
Meine Kindheit, die wohnen.
For whatever reason, the soundtrack here is a little rough. Billy's says, my name is Edward Albert Meyer. He talks about his childhood. This is in Switzerland. He has a little office. So we're picking up something other, let's say, than fully. He speaks about his first contact person, a man named Svath, who started to work with him when he was a 5-year-old boy in Switzerland. This is a pastor in his area, his parish priest, who had been contacted telepathically as well, and we'll leave it at that. Okay. So when you get into the biography, you realize that what he's claiming is that when he was a 5-year-old boy, his father and he had seen a silver object flying over their rural area of Switzerland. He didn't know what it was. His father said maybe it's a secret weapon of Hitler's. I don't know. And it was shortly thereafter that telepathically he heard an elderly man's voice in his head. And he was talking to him and he couldn't figure out what that was about. He goes outside into the forest, lives in this wonderful, beautiful, rugged area, and he walks into the woods, and there is a pear-shaped craft with an elderly guy standing in what looks like a deep-sea diver suit, no helmet. And he said, the man was just very benevolent feeling. I felt safe, and there was nothing. And he beckoned me to come forward, and he said, then that began 11 years of my contacts and being taught by this man named Svath, a human being, a Plejaren human being who at that time was supposedly about 900 years old. And he would teach Meyer things. He would work with him with technologies that would enable this young boy to know things about his own past, personalities that existed before, about events that were yet to come, and we'll get to some of that. And it was a very, when Billy speaks about this experience with Svath, you get a feeling that he had enormous admiration and respect for him, because this was a very, very wise man who patiently brought him into another level of consciousness that was very burdensome. Because by the time he's a 7-year-old boy, he can think like a 35-year-old logical man, and he's in school with a lot. So his childhood was full of all sorts of really rough stuff. He was picked on, he was bullied, he was beat up. He eventually ran off to the French Foreign Legion when he was 16. And then he realized that he didn't want to be part of that because they were teaching him how to be a very effective killer, and he thought, no, this isn't where I belong. We have all of this in other films and everything. I'm going somewhere else with this. But when you start to learn what this man has experienced in his life, it's beyond science fiction. This is a famous photograph called the sunlight shot. And what's interesting about this shot is when it's analyzed, when they blow it up, they find out that there's a branch that goes in front of the object. So it's not a model because, well, let's see what we can see here. We may get something out of the sound here, maybe not, but I'll tell you what we're having. There is a man holding photographs here, such as we just saw, and there is the actual tree. It's over 40 feet tall. So a guy from Nippon TV and Billy on the right, and they're going to walk up the hill and just watch how their size changes, obviously, as they get closer to this tree. And this is the tree more in full bloom in a spring or summer season. And what we saw, the sunlight shot, that's obviously more like winter. The leaves are barren. So Billy's describing where it was, and they still keep walking, they get closer. And when the object was measured in terms of calculating against the known size of the tree, they come up with about 21 foot in diameter for these craft, which is what, here it is, what Billy was told. So we've got this. Now, here's where we have our first radical jump for the evening, perhaps, if it hasn't already happened in some way, shape, or form. But you can see, look at it. I mean, it's like these little guys, that thing's over 40 feet tall, and that's what we were dealing with. So here's the problem that we're really being asked to consider. To forget about certainly not prioritizing UFOs. We can chase lights in the sky forever and ever. And I don't have, and I wouldn't mind if I did, but I don't have any other evidence of any other actual, genuine, confirmed, corroborated contact between extraterrestrial, interdimensional, whatever, and anybody on Earth. Do we have claims? Do people believe that that's happening? Yes, sure. But this is why we don't have mainstream science helping us out because we don't have anything. And here it gets worse. There's no ascension. Not now. We're not going into 5D. Well, this is heresy. I get it. Don't throw anything at me. You know, I said it's going to be a little rough. There's nothing the matter with matter. 3D, these people are three-dimensional people. Their vibrational frequency is higher, just as we, being third-dimensional beings, we can talk about, you know, the other elements of dimensionality, but the primitive people that were in caves 200,000 years ago were three-dimensional people too. Our vibrational and evolutionary level is hopefully higher and different than those who've preceded us by a long period of time. And no one's coming to save us. More bad news. So it's going to get a little rough from here on, and don't get mad at the messenger here, or get mad if you want. But I'm going to take this someplace that hopefully we have some kind of mutual understanding of how to proceed with things. Because I really say, why do we tolerate? Why do we invest in illusions, quacks, frauds, phonies, etc.? If this could, extraterrestrial contact would be the single most historically significant, unparalleled, important development in human history. Now, some people might have some other thing they want to offer up for that, but by golly, this is pretty high in my book. And now I'm going to do something that will probably be very unpopular, and I'm acknowledging the fact that in addition to all of us who are here tonight, this is being seen online by a lot of people. It's being shared, and some people, apart from anyone here, might be upset that I am saying things like this. These are some of the people, and I am saying this because I'm somebody who has either interacted directly with these people or offered and made sure and sent information and evidence to all of these people and organizations who all claim to be interested in the truth about extraterrestrials and UFOs. Some of whom, are, of course, are claiming that they are... Here's an interesting fellow. Remember I told you I was here in Sunflower Cafe? I met a guy. He wasn't called Alex Collier at the time. His name was Ralph Amagron. He was a retired IRS agent. And he was the guy. And I went up there and I got all this stuff. And we would spend time up in Malibu, outside at night, in Ralphie's little plot of land up there. And he was seeing, of course, all these crafts from other worlds, which I was identifying sometimes as Cessna 737. But for Ralphie, it was all from outer space, right? So it's a couple years after I'm spending time with Ralphie, and I'm at a international UFO Expo in Los Angeles. And I see Ralph walking. Now Ralph's got a nice suit on. He's walking with two lovely, ethereal female forms, women. And they're all running. And I say, hey, Ralphie, how are you? Guy walks right by me, doesn't give me the time of day. Later on, one of these women walks by. I say, excuse me, what's with Ralphie? She said, who's Ralphie? I said, Ralph, the guy you were just... Oh, you mean Alex Collier, lifelong Andromedan contactee? I said, oh, really? He wasn't the contactee when I knew him. He was reading everything in the Billy Meier material, and then I started to look at his stuff and his predictions and all. Okay, so I put these names up here because I've dealt with these people in one way, shape, or form or another. There is no longer a place in any of the UFO events for the Meier case to be presented. And I routinely send stuff out. Because if this is true, the room empties as soon as that truth is told, and everybody else who's telling their stories, who cares? Now, I mentioned to you Joe Tisk, the investigator, and there's a name on the third line up from the bottom, Ryan Sprague, or whatever he pronounces it. So Ryan is one of the people who, for years, has defamed Meier. I mean, well, we'll see it in a moment. He's done no actual research or investigation. He's relied on other people's attacks primarily to go out and call Myers a hoaxer and a fraud, and other people duplicated his stuff. So he sought his own significance in attacking Myers. As a matter of fact, one of the articles is online, and I have all, as I say, I've got it all. So many skeptics have duplicated Myers' photos time and time again. His ex-wife says it's a hoax. He's amassed followings of believers. Michael Horn, the self-proclaimed publicist. No, I'm not self-proclaimed. I have a contract with Meier. I get to do this for free as long as I can say whatever I want including, I don't know about this, that's speculative, and this I'll stand behind, and you can prove it for you. So, no, all this stuff, this is the kind of stuff that is on the internet everywhere. People who are going to attack and ridicule what is either the biggest, longest running, most impenetrable fraud, hoax, or the most important story in human history. So just the other day, a couple days ago, I put up a notice about doing this, presentation, and Ryan jumps up there with some other people online on Twitter, and one of the emails, can you please find me one shred of evidence that Joe Tisk worked for the U.S. military, and blah, blah, blah. How can I get in touch with him? Well, I posted the link to Tisk's article. Why didn't this guy who's attacking read the article where Joe had his own email right at the bottom? Anybody wants to talk to me, write me, says Joe. So then I said, well, here's his email. And I talked to Joe a day later. He said, oh yeah, I heard from him. So I sent this guy is one of the 8 or 9 people that were all in this thread, and I copied it to him. And I said, I understood you communicated with Joe, about Meier case authenticity. Share with the people here what you learned. When people find the truth, there's no shame in admitting having been wrong in the past. We're all going to be wrong in the future too, about any number of things. We make mistakes. That's part of the game. There's no perfect beings. But the problem was that Ryan couldn't man up. He couldn't say, hey, I'm sorry, I got it wrong. Because Joe said to him, I talked to Joe, it was yesterday, he said, yeah, I heard from Ryan, this guy Ryan, and he wanted to know about this and about my service and all. And I said to him, look, unless you can show me different, those are aliens that are meeting with, and I don't mean people from Mexico or South America or China or anything like that. These are people from another world. I'm putting my reputation behind it. That was the end of Ryan. Will he apologize for that? Will he even just, you don't even have to apologize. You can just say, hey, I found out I was wrong. What can I learn here? Oh, but I got to tell you about me. See, I'm the world's leading expert on UFOs. I love putting this up. I'll tell you why. Because, so when I send stuff off, if I want to rub it, and people say, well, I'm the only, representing the only authentic case and contactee, prove me wrong. I have 40 years of actual investigation and research into this. I've been within 20 feet of a small Plejaren monitoring craft when I was living in the mountains of Brazil. And I've been given prophetically accurate information from the Plejaren forwarded to me by Meier in a transcript dated and time-stamped about something that was going to happen that could conceivably be damaging to this whole work, to Billy and to me, and a suggestion about how to avoid it, which I took. And we avoided an unpleasant circumstance with a guy named Cal Korff, who was setting me up for a big, Cal Korff, quite a character. Okay, so then we come back to this idea, forget about UFOs, there's nothing we can do with UFOs. Well, why did you go through all this? Oh, well, I'm not done telling you to forget what to forget about. Forget about MUFON. In 1953, Ascot, remember I said she's a little time traveler too, as Svath was, and we're getting into more of that. She told Meier in this very lengthy thing, which also included, by the way, the assassination of the Kennedys, and I don't know if I made a slide on the internet, but MUFON will be your greatest adversary. It doesn't exist yet, but it's coming. And your life will no longer be secure. Billy has survived 23 documented attempts in his life. I've seen the bullet holes for one, interviewed witnesses to about 14 or 15 of them. He's telling the truth. So here's the bombshell on MUFON, because I have a friend who's part of my little research team. He lives, I think, down in Tucson or Tempe, I forget. His name's Kenneth Smith. He retired as the vice president, director of operations for Orbital Flight Systems, the competitor to Musk. They send rockets up and put little satellites up there. And he has a friend still working at Orbital, because Ken retired a year or two ago, who was approached to be recruited by someone at MUFON, who told him that most of MUFON's public information was intentionally bogus or redacted. The U.S. State Department and the CIA basically control this activity. Good luck with MUFON. And it took me a year with the director of MUFON, Jan Hartson, to get him to even put the Meier case up on MUFON's website, hidden some, because they wouldn't. And Hartson told me personally in 2013 in Las Vegas, oh yeah, I know the Meier case is authentic, it's a little too good. And we're going, what do you mean, too good? So, well, then what do we do? Well, we've got to forget about aliens too, not only UFOs, so-called aliens, the imaginary reptilians, Greys, Dracos. The Greys, folks, simply are the myth that has been built up around the androids that were discovered at the Roswell crash, an actual crash of extraterrestrial craft with androids, no human beings in it, and it's one of about 8 or 9 craft crashes on the world, in Russia, other places, some have been recovered, et cetera, et cetera. So the alien thing is the product of disinformation from secret military and fantasists, people who carry it forward and perpetuate it. I'll get to the real case, but I'll tell you, I just saw a video a couple weeks ago with a guy, and it's a really nice guy too. I'm trying to remember what's his name. You'll probably know it before I do, but he's kind of new on the scene about UFOs, and he worked in the military, and he's a physician, I think, or he was a surgeon's assistant or something or other. I don't know why his name escapes me. And I didn't call him a fraud or anything. I wanted to see more of his information, but you know, of course, he's talking about all the different aliens he saw underground, and it's like endless, right? A parade of it. It's very different from the real extraterrestrial, the negative human ETs that had been based on this planet for thousands of years underneath the Great Pyramid in Egypt. Remember that Edgar Cayce, for those of you who followed Edgar Cayce, talked about a large spacecraft underneath the Great Pyramid and this and that. He was right. And Meier in '53 with Ascot was taken down there and shown it. It was more than just a spacecraft. These people who were behind virtually every religion on the planet and moving everything, they were going to create a false second coming. And they had a guy, some of you might know his name, Reinhold Schmidt. He was claimed to be a UFO contactee a few decades ago. They had him conditioned psychologically through a very advanced hypnosis thing that he was going to be the second coming. They had fabricated a cross of the crucifixion, bloody, crowny thorn, the sphere of destiny or whatever it was called, all this stuff. And Meier was shown this stuff. And Billy said, why don't you get rid of these people? They said, we can't. We're not allowed to interfere in your world. You will, they have free will, you have free will, but we can't interfere. What happened was, again, according to the information in the case, 1978 or so, there is a holiday that's celebrated in Switzerland, and they shoot off cannons in the different valleys and stuff. This group, the B'Phath, put an unmanned craft right over Billy's home, where we saw him through the window, and there's Billy, right? And they beamed down a sonic attack, a weapon that was intended to blow up the center, and people would think, well, they hear another explosion, and then later on they find out, oh, well, this building was destroyed with these people. Oh, it must have been a gas stove or something or other. The Plejaren had positioned a craft right above Billy's home in the center. They had made it invisible to any detection through screens that they have. And by the way, our military is already working on screening things and all that. So when they shot down this big sound, it hit the ground with great force. It shook, but it didn't do any damage at the center. And the Plejaren at that point, technically, they had been attacked. Not Billy, they had been attacked. That gave them the permission to go and take control of the attackers. They removed all those people. They got rid of the craft and everything else. They closed up all space under the pyramid that would be detectable. Now, there was a member of that group, of that B'Phath Giza intelligences. You're going to probably know his name. Anybody here ever hear somebody called Ashtar? He's no longer alive. He was a real person. He was part of this B'Phath Giza intelligence contingent who were like a splinter group. The Plejaren had taken the right turn. These folks took the left turn. They were based underneath the pyramid. they had, in their past, there were people with names like Kamagal the first and Kamagal the second, and one of their more famous members who worked as a, as a power over people, his name was Jehovah. He was a person. There's a drawing of him from Semyaze in this material. Okay, well, how do we find the truth? And if we find the truth, it's probably going to be a bit harsh. So what would happen if we could find a mainstream scientist to be interested even in the overall topic of UFOs? Well, funny I should ask. Harvard professor Avi Loeb's search for ET is over. That's my blog. Now, we'll get to Avi here. He's a Harvard astronomer. I saw one or two of his videos. Really nice, intelligent guy. I mean, honestly, he had a video up, I think, on TED or something about how we should be more modest about our place in life and understand the bigger picture of things. So this is hopeful. Here's a guy. So I send out to him, I send him a couple emails, I leave phone messages, nothing. So I did write about it, and then as per my phone messages and because of your interest, I sent him a ton of information. It contained within just a couple articles a bunch of links, things that would keep on linking to other things, thinking and hoping maybe he'll get in touch. Well, naturally, Avi hasn't gotten back to me. And this is a very important number. What is that value? What do you see there? 6 what? 6 billion? What? 174? Right? Go on. 960. Actually, though, it's his phone number at Harvard. I just ran it with commas instead of decimals. So, and also here for our on-screen or online audience as well, I'm putting up Avi's phone number here, and you can find him online. Because I think, and I say this, please, if you do call him, be respectful. This man is not an enemy of the truth. He just doesn't know it yet. Now, it's hard for scientists, admittedly, to receive information from people who don't have a lot of letters after their name that they haven't heard about. As I wrote to him in the email, there isn't a scientist on Earth at SETI, any place, that actually expects to find real evidence of extraterrestrial existence. They talk about it. They say they'd like to. SETI it's a terrible fraud. And I've told them they are a terrible fraud. I offered Seth Shostak in person, the Myers didn't want to know about it. So it is easy enough even for a scientist to understand this evidence. All they have to do is go through the scientific method. I was talking with someone, actually a scientist that I was talking to, I think in California, and I wanted to get him to look at this stuff, and he said, well, you know, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. I said, well, we have plenty of evidence, but that's not true what you just said. He said, what do you mean? I said, extraordinary claims, whatever evidence, simply need to be discussed, evaluated, studied, researched, according to the scientific method. What's extraordinary evidence? That the Earth goes around the sun was extraordinary evidence 500 years ago. It's not extraordinary evidence. This is evidence. Don't approach it with that prejudice. If you're scientific and you want to put an end to this discussion right now, you take this evidence and you review what's been done with it, you do your own testing on it, extraordinary or not. If it bothers, the conclusions bother you because your beliefs don't accord with it, then do a little, therapy on yourself. You're not here to just keep on promoting whatever somebody else tells you is real. So we now get back to the beginning of what this was about. What you need to know to assure your own future survival. This gets into the reason for all of this stuff. We talked about Svath, a time traveler. We found out recently that Svath's letters to Billy were kept for a long time, in some cases up to 70 years, not to be published, some of this, until these times. And one of them was where it was explained how Svath told Meier when he was very young, 5, 7 years old, maybe, said, we don't have enough time to do everything we need to do with you, and that is the reason why we take you out of this time and return you at the time that you left, even though you've been gone from this world for a week or a month or 3 weeks or whatever it is. And it's like, oh, really? So Billy just on February 3rd had his 82nd birthday, except he celebrated his 100th birthday last October based on all of the time outside of this frame of time. So for everybody that's into all of the stuff about UFOs and the rest of it, you've got some real tongue twisters here to go through if you want to go through it. In 1946, Sloth lays it out about climate. Who's talking about climate change in 1946? No, he says, no. Climate destruction. I guarantee you right now, all the wonderful environmental groups in our world don't know crap. Pardon me. And they don't want to know. I've been trying to reach them too. Overpopulation. Oh, there's an unpopular topic, but he was telling them back then, you people just keep on overpopulating your planet. You don't understand how things work. No, it's not about eugenics and genocides and all of that. It's about managing numbers so that everything works in harmony with nature. Except that here we know that the ecosystem, the climate, the atmosphere, and nature, and the whole planet will be destructively included in this. So we also have this from Svath, among many things, because we have whole documents online. We have a document of his predictions, and we'll get to that because this is part of his predictions, number 223 of about 300 and something or other. In the south of Europe, the all-transforming consequences of the enormous will be enormous when the volcanoes, you can read it, Mount Etna, Vesuvius, Stromboli, as well as the submarine, largest active volcano of Europe, Mount Marsili, and two other submarine volcanoes begin to erupt. This is in Meier's material. Here we have it from 1948, and he has it also in 76, I think. They talked to him about when Vesuvius erupts, his big stuff is coming. Here, in this one, 224, also the caldera, that is to say the super volcano Phlegraean fields in Italy, Campi Flegrei, often known as Campi Flegrei, is making itself more and more known. Science, about 4 weeks ago, there was an article, scientists are noticing unusual activity beneath Campi Flegrei. Oh, really? Well, you know, people, how you're just discovering this? We often say the more we get into the Meier material and then people, new discoveries, we say, well, we read the script and the book, we saw the movie, we know how it turns out. Don't you people want to start doing something to let people know? For instance, Meier was told that when Vesuvius erupts, it's going to take out the Vatican. And everybody said, no. Vesuvius is in Naples, the Vatican's in Rome. Then, about, I don't know, a few years ago, scientists discover, wait a minute, the magma chambers for Vesuvius in Naples, they run all the way under Rome. 2 or 3 years ago, at the Rome airport, they're starting to see vents of steam coming up from magma beneath the ground. Billy publishes it in 76. Well, when this happens, let's get ready. That will be tied in with other events. And, you know, you talk about things like fake news and all of that. Here's Svath is telling him in the coming times, fake news, 1948. Look out. We've got fake news coming, folks. So, among other things, and there's many, many more. By the way, where it says moon landing hoax, later on, Billy publishes a lot of this stuff in 51, in 58, and then a few years ago, they explained to him how they actually ran the whole hoax on Apollo 11. This was done through hypnosis and drugs, treating these particular astronauts. They really believed they went and all that. It was filmed on Earth. Okay, a lot of people have this theory, but it gets interesting. Because then the people say, well, how do you account for the fact that those objects are up on the moon? And so it was explained to Meier by one of the Plejaren named Quetzal. Apollo 13 was not a failed mission. Apollo 13 landed on the moon. They traipsed out the stuff that was supposedly from Apollo 11, put it down there so that in the future, when either probes go or another landing, you're going to see the artifacts. And Billy said, well, won't the truth be discovered? He says, it's not terribly likely. He was told the Apollo 11 hoax required 37 people. Those people who were in the know after all was done, there were accidents and sudden illnesses leading to immediate death. He said, even the original astronauts don't know. Now, some people have pointed out, because there's videos online where the original astronauts are sitting and they're talking and one of them is fidgeting and seeming confused because somewhere in his consciousness this isn't making sense because they didn't go there. Okay, I can't tell you that's true. That's speculative as far as I'm concerned. But you can read the details and think about it yourself. Asket was, as I said, a time traveler, and I mentioned before that she, in addition to the MUFON thing, she told Meier 10 years before it happened about the murder of JFK, and then about the death of his brother in Los Angeles, and a few dozen other things pertaining to other world leaders, the poisoning of this leader and that one, how Stalin was poisoned, and the same poison was used on this guy and that guy, all this stuff. And she had taken Meier also back on a couple of time travel trips to, one of them was to Jerusalem 32 AD, where they got to interact with a man who had a number of disciples, and that's a fascinating story. We won't go too far into that tonight, but yeah, that'll blow your mind. This is Quetzal. He is also one of the main contact people for Meier from the Plejaren. And among the different things that he did in 1978, well, let me explain. 1978, the original investigative team goes over to Switzerland. And they're in the kitchen where a lot of the conversations go down. And Wendell and Lee and Britt and Billy and a few of the other Swiss are sitting around the table. And Billy says something about the San Francisco earthquake. And they say to him, oh, you mean the 1906 earthquake? And he says, no, 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 the one that's coming. They said, what do you mean? Okay, I'll be right back. He comes back with a Kodak envelope. We still were just mainly getting our photographs developed. Throws down 11 photographs on the kitchen table. And so Lee and Britt elders, by the way, went over as skeptics. They are high-level private investigators. They do a lot of work in securing phone lines, computers, safe rooms for Fortune 500 companies. Wendell, they thought, was a little too gullible. He was all into UFOs, and you're going to go for a ride, Wendell, but it ain't going to be in a UFO. We're coming with you. And that began, they went to Switzerland and did investigation over almost a 10-year period. So they're sitting there in 1978, and we have this was written up in a book, and I have the pages on my site, and Billy is giving them these photographs, and Wendell's saying, we're looking at these photographs. They're not photographs of paintings or drawings. They're photographs of San Francisco. I recognize this. And the city is in real disarray. It's obviously been hit by a catastrophe. Smoke, fire, buildings have fallen into each other. We recognize the pyramidal top of the Transamerica building is all cracked. We're trying to figure out when this happened or will happen, because Billy says, I'm not allowed to give you the date. And that was just part of the thing with things that will happen with certainty. They will give prophecies to warn about things that we could still change and correct. We're coming back to this idea about our future survival. This is all tied into it. Well, how is it tied into it? Well, okay. Billy Meier, there it is. This is, I don't expect you to be able to read it all, but we have it online. It's all available. He is talking about the destruction of San Francisco. And Wendell, when they're looking at the books, pardon me, the photographs, he's saying the cars in the photographs, we focused in on the cars that we could see because they don't look like the cars of today. They don't have all the big fins and big... He says they're smaller, mainly rounder, more glass windshields. Some of the glass is going into the roof line. They look more like, if anything, like the VW Bug, you know. So he said the other thing was they didn't have those external projections out there, those side view mirrors, the ones that Tesla, Toyota, Mercedes, and a whole bunch of other companies have already ready to replace with the little cameras, with the screens that the Japanese companies have already developed, so that your outside view mirrors will no longer be necessary. We have the internal camera backup stuff already, right? 1978, Wendell's seeing cars that don't have the side view mirrors. How is that possible? Is everybody in on some massive hoax here? So Meier himself is no slouch when it comes to, bringing forward information that he's either learned from the Plejaren or calculated himself. And these are only a handful. We have over 200 specific examples of prophetically accurate, primarily scientific and geopolitical information. Meier is the first person I know of, apart from publishing all this warning about climate change and all, AIDS epidemic, explained that no, that wasn't made in a laboratory. Bad behavior between humans and green-tailed monkeys, and then it started to spread. Fall of the Berlin Wall, they foretold that before it happened. Billy, in 1958, plastic credit cards, portable phones. Everybody will have a TV and a computer in their home, interconnected electronically around the world. It's called the internet. In 81, he's the first to talk about the fall of France to radical Islamists. It's underway. There have already been some of the events he's talked about. That's coming yet. And that we're going to have 2 coming civil wars here. I read that for the first time in 1986 or 7 at Randy Winter's. Randy was a presenter of this material, very good speaker. He had one of the books called The Prophetically. And in 81, Billy made the first warning about 2 coming civil wars to the U.S. And I remember we were laughing. What is this guy talking about? A civil war in America. I'm not laughing anymore. Danger of war with Russia, this is huge. The prophecies and predictions about this go back over 10,000 years in this material. Meier is not the first contact person / prophet working with the Plejaren who are using time travel and other means of trying to inform the populations at the time. Big danger. A-bomb radiations, ozone damage. What's coming? According to Meier, as of October of last year, a coming huge global financial collapse. Well, anybody could have said that. Well, the funny thing is, in 2006, I was in Switzerland with Billy, and I popped in and I said, Billy, tell me, was the reason for the Iraq war, was that fundamentally because of oil? He said, oh no, fundamentally. Billy's very precise. You ask this, he answers, he doesn't give you anything more, but he uses the word. Fundamentally, it's about your dollar. Because if things go a certain way, you may as well roll cigarettes with your paper money. 13 years ago, it's on YouTube since 2007, and then this new information, and there's more. There are threats to the safety of the rulers, for better or for worse, however you might think of whoever they are, how you feel about them, and to the population, because what Billy said in here, this global financial crash, it's going to affect Americans too. The people of America will be dispossessed of their wealth and belongings. And it will be at that time that the government will turn the military and the police against the citizenry, the partly heavily armed citizenry, and that indeed, and this one, I couldn't believe this last one, he says, there are plans among certain groups of what you'd call the elite for genocides. How many people here just can't wait to send their blood away for their DNA to be taken over and processed by a bunch of people who are not doing good things with it? I mean, you start to look in here. We have a video up where Billy talks about it, but this was from 1987. 2 terrible civil wars break out in America, one following the other. Country breaks apart. All right? 5 different territories. Sectarian fanatics will play a dictatorial role. Means various, maybe 1 or more religions in different places. People who are very fundamentalist or what have you will start to... So I said dispossessed. This is the way he puts it. And more than that, in 1975 and again in 2012, Meier was reminded that the superpower USA could come to an end after 2020. Now, I looked at those words carefully. I don't think it means that the place is nuked at this time. Superpower USA stands for what? United States of America. If there's civil wars and if that previous thing is true and the country breaks up, we're no longer a United States, but there still can be a federal government with all of its military might still trying to dominate the rest of the world and all of that. But then this country as a major power is no longer the superpower. China is going to emerge. And, you know, a lot of people can see it. It's been in this material for a while. BRICS will be the new, you know, ultimately new financial model, if you want to call it that. Brazil, Russia, India, China, what is it? Thank you. This is Ptah, said to be the leader of the Plejaren race as it interacts with Billy, the father of the woman Semyaze, whose photo we didn't put up here, but a main contact person of Billy, 1975 on. She had a near-fatal accident. A few years later, she's said to be being rehabilitated. It'll take her 70 years to get back. It's a whole story in here. Again, there's so much here. We could do literally 2 hours on each of the real segments in this case and never get to all of it. But we're talking about the future survival, and we're not done with that. There is something that Ptah told Meier on November 6th. It was published because they told Meier that the next president is going to be this guy named Trump. Well, what kind of a guy is Trump, says Billy? He said, pretty chaotic, catastrophic guy, interesting fellow, not a bad person, holds really to the idea he wants to do good for the people in America, but he's got some very bad policies, such as environmental and health things. He's got some good ideas about preventing globalization, and we can't tell which way this is all going to go with him, but we can tell you that after he's elected, because they're all expecting his opponent to win, who actually the player, I'll go back to that in a minute. Because she's not going to win, they are going to use a concocted means to try to get him out of office. That is, they'll say that the Russians colluded with him. They said, that's not true. Whether or not that, they tell him, we don't know how that'll turn out. When I said about Clinton, in 2008, and we've had this document up for a long time too, Billy asks about the primary, the Democrat primary, Barack Obama running against Hillary Clinton. And, you know, who's this guy and what's going to happen? And they said, well, Barack Obama is going to win, and it's fortunate for the people. This is where they gave information they weren't asked. It's fortunate for the people of Earth that Hillary Clinton will never attain power. Because if she did, nuclear war. And that will bring the destruction of America for sure, as well as other things. There's no winners. I think we can all figure that out. And he had asked at that time about Barack Obama. What kind of guy is he? They said, well, actually, as a human being, he's about the best human being who will ever occupy that office as a human being. Whether or not he'll be a great president, we're not saying. Later on, after they, you know, things had gone down and all, and they said, well, even though Spath, back in 48, I think it was, tells him there will be an African-American president who will be a good man and blah, 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 but unfortunately, he will not be strong enough to withstand the influences, the negative influences around him, and he will fail in his own desire to be a great president. So they're not political. They don't, this person or that person. And basically, recently, they wrote a whole thing, published a whole thing about Trump is getting more and more stupid, and he's just, you know, more problems. Why America thinks it has the right to sanction people and all this stuff with tariffs and, you know, this illusion that we run the world. Well, that illusion is going to run into a lot of trouble, and a lot of it will be due to Trump as well, and others who may be even in other parties, but who have the same agenda to push us into a war with Russia that we, for no reason. Yes, the reasons, of course, are geopolitical, control of resources, all the usual stuff that this country's been doing for at least 80 years. So, you may remember that somewhere back in this presentation, I said forget about UFOs. Because these things, they're upon us. All the stuff warned about. Meier sends 3,000 letters around in the 50s to government leaders warning about the environment, warning about all these things. One response was from, I think, West Germany, said, thank you. That was it. Nobody else would respond to him. Nobody's paid attention. They're still trying to deny climate change. And now what's coming in terms of the upheavals is unstoppable. And by next year, we will see some pretty distinct manifestations that we will go, yeah, okay, maybe they were right. So, we come down to this. What really is the reason for this case? Well, as I said, it centers around our future survival. For us, these folks, assuming they do exist, there's nothing, we're not going to do anything to them, for them. Maybe they've been trying to do more for us for a few thousand years. And what they've been trying to do, many times over, is to bring to us what they simply call the spiritual teaching. Non-religious, no beliefs, there's no superstitions and rituals and all of this. It centers around complete self-responsibility. Nobody coming to save us from up there, whether we hear them in our heads or anything else. Neutral positive thinking. Isn't that positive thinking? No. Positive thinking is everything's fine, everything's fine. You know, we're going to just band-aid over, we're not going to pay attention to the negative because that's bad. They say, no, you have to understand how life works, the positive and the negative, the balance between those things, the way you learn to think to balance your positives and negatives so that you can decide what thoughts are you perpetuating, what thoughts are you modifying, what thoughts are you dismissing and no longer sending forward, because we're not dealing with beliefs, we're dealing with truth and knowledge. We have to see things as they really are in order to make conscious, responsible decisions, because our lives evermore are going to depend on our ability to think clearly. We don't have to run out and change the world. We don't have to convert people. We're not here to missionize. We're here to say, if we study this, we get to know about the truth. About, well, what's a spirit? Is there such a thing as a soul? And what about abortion? Well, they're saying, well, you've got a few things going on here. The soul isn't really what you think. There's no soul groups. There's no soul this, soul that. The soul only refers to the psyche that is centralized, not exclusive, but the central location is around the solar plexus. And this term got built up around it. This is where the nerve plexus is, where elements of the personality are quite active in the ego and all this stuff, right around here. And so the soul, if you want to call it that, but if you really call it the psyche, upon death, that dissolves. The personality dissolves. Well, wait, you said reincarnation? Hold on. The spirit is that eternal, immortal part of us that is placed deep within the center of the brain. It's just the teeniest thing, but it contains the potential of the universe. It is a holographic fragment of creation, this universe that we're in. They use this term. And well, what about God? God refers to these people that were here before. Remember? Kamagal and Jehovah and this and that. Oh, okay. Yeah, they're not the creators of all things. I've got a friend here in Sedona who thinks he channels the Elohim. He thinks they're the creators, gods of the universe. It's a little hard to explain this to him. I like him. I've known him for 45 years. But he's off on some kooky thing. He can't explain anything. Okay, so you've got, I mean, you know, and it's okay. You know, here's the thing about it. We are all, there's no superiority hierarchy in here. Billy, who's the guy that gets the gig with these people, he has one vote in his community. He's got 35 other people or whatever. He's got that, he can do that thing. But he's not any more important in that community. He wrote a wonderful short article called To Be of Equal Value. Every human being intrinsically is of equal value. Not necessarily equal ability, talent, accomplishments, wealth, whatever. Equal value in the creation. Each one is, we're all carrying that part piece of creation, that immortal human spirit. Well, what does that do? Does that die too? No, it's a little different. When you die, the spirit goes into what we'd call they call it the beyond. It's a kind of etheric realm. You're not gambling in the woods with Aunt Edna and Uncle Phil. You don't see everybody ever. There's no you in that sense. Your spirit form, or the one that has enlivened this and many other previous incarnations, personalities, is in a quote-unquote resting state, assimilating all of the knowledge and wisdom, also from the psyche, from the personality, from everything you've ever done or said, and all of the positives are retained. And there's things that we know nothing about. There's one thing called the storage banks that's similar to what's called the Akashic Record we've all heard about. But a lot of this is very different than anything we find, because nobody has been working with this information. And again, we have to think it through for ourselves. But what they're saying is, when the time is right, and it's usually going to be, under normal circumstances, it's going to be about 152 years that the spirit is in the beyond. Then there's a frequency, vibrational attraction for that spirit to reincarnate, come into the womb, and it goes from being an embryo to a fetus. And he said, well, what about abortion? They said, well, again, right, wrong. What? He said, okay, what is it? They said, we know through our science that the spirit enters and enlivens the embryo, turns into the fetus at the 21st day. Well, what about abortion? We allow abortion if it should be necessary, and it isn't that much any longer in our worlds because we have great science, up to the 21st day. Past that point, we would really do everything to avoid that, and we can, because then we consider it would be a taking of a life, a murder. It's not a murder. It's not a taking of a life before that time. And they said, when you finally get your science to recognize that there is a spirit, and when it enlivens with the heartbeat in the 21st day and all that, then you'll resolve your antagonism, and then both sides are right and both sides are wrong, aren't they? So when they come together with knowledge, you can choose with real science and knowledge to do the right thing, to work to minimize any risk of an unnecessary abortion. But if it has to happen, then it happens, hopefully within that realm. You know, and you keep increasing your tolerances to as close to perfection with working hand in hand. Spirituality and science really they meet, ideally, when we find the truth, which is often harsh, but sometimes it's great and liberating too. So karma doesn't exist the way we're taught either. We don't come into life with the burden of all this stuff. We may have certain quote-unquote lessons or things to learn that we didn't complete, or that, you know, are new to this life, and some that may have been dealing with in previous lives, but we're not burdened by that. How unfair would it be if reincarnation is true, and we've had countless thousands of previous personalities? We'd never get a chance to get off the ground here. We'd be always trying to pay the debt from the past lives. It's not logical. And these folks, if anything, they're logical. They say, we know that. They say, we don't know that. It's not about we believe it. I only found the word believe once in the thousands of pages in here. Ptah says to Billy, I believe the name of the woman in Austria you're thinking of is such and such. That's it. That was conversational. I think this is what you're looking for. But there's nothing about beliefs. There's nothing to believe. We either find truth, knowledge, we come upon it, we evolve our thinking, and we improve our knowledge. We don't rest on that. So politics and religion kind of come out as the ugly twin sisters of limitation that we deal with here. Politics makes people stupid. I'm sorry. This is my opinion. How can you ever decide to be on this side of something, which means then if somebody over here has a good idea, you vote against it, you won't do it, unless, of course, you get something for it, so the truth is corrupted all over the place. Now, people can have their opinions, let's just say, about Trump's approach to building a wall. Well, in essence, why would people disagree on the idea of protecting your country? Everybody on earth tries to protect their country. Is that the right way to do it or not? But it looks like the opponents, and they could be within his party or outside of it, categorically will oppose anything he does. So politics makes people stupid. They can't really say, well, let's look at the merits of that. Yes, we should protect the country. You never hear people on the left say we should protect the country. Okay, and then the people on the right seem to go crazy about the extremes. So you have the polarization. You've got the fight between beliefs. Politics is another form of belief system. So we come again to remind ourselves, oops, that this is the level of responsibility for our own life. We can't rely on leaders and getting things from the top down anywhere. We will have leaders, for better or for worse, but we have to be responsible. And the more we do that, the better the quality of the leaders ultimately. I don't think we're going to see that for a while, but we better really work on this one. Because there's nobody, nothing real or imagined or any authorities that has any responsibility for our lives. It's just that for millennia, we, as human beings of Earth, have been conditioned to believe and to buy into and accept that idea, whether it came from a standard religion, a belief system, a cult, this or that, a political system. No, nobody has that responsibility. Are there people that we entrust to do things to make sure that things get done for us in life? Ideally, but we see that going down the tubes all the time too. So there is something called the Salome Peace Meditation. It's a phrase that's spoken for 20 minutes. People get together in a group a few times a month. And they speak this phrase in sync, not necessarily all with each other, meaning in sync with people on this planet, and at the same time, we're told that there are 3.2 billion extraterrestrial human beings in the Federation that the Plejaren are in, and probably kind of the leaders of it in terms of their advancement in terms of spirituality, what have you, that are doing it on our behalf to try to beam a vibrational frequency with us, not instead of us, but with us in concert to break up the crystallization of negativity that the planet is enshrouded by from millennia of kooky stuff. Politics, religion, murder, war, terrorism. Billy said in 10,000 years, past 10,000 years, we've had a total of 250 years of peace, not even sequentially. There's not been 250 years of peace on Earth. We've had 250 scattered years out of 10,000 years when there wasn't human being warring with human being because of all the machinations of those things that we've empowered to mislead us. 100% self-responsibility. This is a symbol. Meier, as a child, was taught to recognize telepathically several million symbol pictures. This is the symbol for peace. Now, you notice in the center, does something look familiar? We, according to this information in here, and we have it in one of the films, Billy explains, the peace advocates on Earth are walking around with signs that are the rune, we know what the runes are, right? The symbol for death. That's what our peace symbol literally is. The symbol, it's a sword, it's inverted. This is the tree of life. This is the peace symbol right in the center, the tree of life. As I said, one of millions of symbols. We recently published a book that they made available from Switzerland with a few hundred of these symbols. And you just use them for meditation, and it's a fascinating study. Again, if we want to say, well, what is this Billy Meier case about? Salome, peace symbol. Billy hammers away. Peace, love, freedom, harmony. I remember sitting with Billy any number of times over the years and saying, what can I do? And he said, well, tell people to be reasonable. Focus on peace, love, freedom, harmony. If those are the cornerstones of your life, you really can't go wrong. If you're intent on that. Now, you can say it and not mean it, but if we really are about peace, love, freedom, and harmony, we get to contemplate that, meditate that. We can run the peace meditation in our head. They have some beautiful meditations on so many things that you can do for a few minutes at a time. There's lovely things here. This is why in this kind of confrontational approach, if you will, this is not about UFOs. It's not about extraterrestrials. If this is true, we're in a universe teeming with human life. Not our solar system, but in a universe teeming with human life at all sorts of levels of development. There's many that are below us, on par, evolutionarily speaking, others far beyond us, and it's just the process of this creation. If we can finally, it is said, Meier is the seventh and final prophet for Earth to try to bring this teaching here, plop it down in the electronic age where it's not going to get turned into a religion or a belief system. We've got it, so it can't be adulterated as it was in the past when it was brought originally by Enoch, Elijah, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Emmanuel. Who's Emmanuel? The guy who didn't really ever exist was named Jesus Christ. Emmanuel was the real guy. Yes, he was crucified. He survived. Oh, I don't want to go off too far. What about the sixth prophet? Who's the sixth prophet? His name is Muhammad. Oh, he was marrying 9-year-olds. No. He had a cousin. I think his name was Omar, and there were these caliphs. And each of the prophets, up until the time of Billy, they were all in an age and time when people didn't read and write. So you've got the prophet going around speaking the teaching and doing, and if you're like, you've got a scribe who'll take it down like Judas took it down accurately, and the real betrayer, Judah Iscariot, not Judas Iscariot, the Judah who betrayed Emmanuel was the son of a Pharisee, and who did go and hang himself after he did it. When you read the Talmud Emmanuel, the newest translation of the original teaching that was discovered by Meier and a Greek Orthodox priest in 1964 in the outskirts of Jerusalem in an ancient tomb that they were led to by the Plejaren, which were partially translated by this guy Isa Rashid from Aramaic into German and then into English, and then the final corrected translation done within the last couple of years. You learn that there were 17 female disciples. None of them survived the church, who exited everything out that it didn't want in there. You learn that the healings that were done ostensibly by Emmanuel, he wasn't raising the dead, because when you're dead, you're dead. What did he do? He was taught to learn by teachers in the Himalayas as well as extraterrestrial teachers. Meditation, deep insight. He was in effect a master hypnotist as well. So when people came to him in their unknowing, thinking that he's some savior for them, and he recognizes that they're entrusting him with something, he reaches into their own consciousness in his communication so that they believe themselves to heal. Because most healing, from here on, it has to be done by us individually, primarily from the inside out. Yes, you go get a massage, or you get an x-ray, you get sewn up, whatever. But we're not here now to heal each other in a codependent way. We're here to figure out how to heal ourselves. So that if we don't have something outside of us, we can get as far in that as possible and bring ourselves back to mental, physical, emotional health. You've got the herbs and the balms and the salves that Emmanuel was taught, so he was a master herbalist. All this is in the Talmud Emmanuel and more. What happened when he was on the cross? He didn't die because he had been taught by the Himalayan yogis how to so control his own bodily functions that he would appear dead. So when the wise men came to Jerusalem and entered into the tomb through the rear entrance, because this event was known that it would occur, they started to minister to him right away, so that within 3 days, when Gabriel was there, he could roll away the stone, and Emmanuel comes out. It's as if he's alive. Well, yeah, he was alive. And then what happens on the road to Damascus with Saul, that's explained in the Talmud. All this stuff. What happened to this guy Emmanuel? Well, he, with his mother Mary, his brother Thomas, and what was her name again? Mary Magdalene, right? She wasn't his girlfriend. She was a confidant. She was one of his trusted disciples, if you will. They left that area in the Jerusalem area, and they went into other countries. They went to Afghanistan. They went to other places where he would start to preach, and they'd throw him out. And he finally ends up back in India, in Srinagar, India. Mary dies when he's about 45, 48. He marries an Indian woman, and as they say in there, she bears him numerous descendants, one of whom is named Joseph, who about 70 years after the crucifixion takes the original writings that Judas had done on the parchments, wrapped up in resin-encrusted animal skins, takes him down. He was told where the tomb was, goes inside, takes up some of the stones from the floor, puts it in there, and Meier is told much earlier in his own life, you will find something of great value, you will be led to it, and that was it. And he's entrusted with that. After Isa Rashid has sent some of this translation to Meier, he sends him a letter saying, listen, I probably can't send you any more. Some people in Jerusalem, some powerful religions here, they know that I've got something. We've got to get out of here. So he and his family take the original scrolls that he had. They go into Lebanon. They sequester the scrolls in a wall, in a building, in a refugee village. Within a week, the Israelis come in and destroy that village. The original scrolls are destroyed. Isa Rashid and his family survive. They get into Baghdad in Iraq. And within a relatively short period of time, he and his family are machine gunned to death, ostensibly by the Mossad. No more remaining parts of the scrolls. I mean, folks, you have no idea until you start getting into this. You know, it's like, as I say, Sunflower Cafe, the guy gives me 1,800 pages in 1986 and starts off in this thing, and so many people that are finding this in their own way, in their own time, and doing their own due diligence. But for those people who do find it and who consider that maybe they have learned something, I say to them, now that you know the truth, if you don't, what will you do? Now that you know the information, what will you do? Will you vet it for yourself to find out what it is, as well as if it's what is represented in any presentation to you? And My blog, we have people from literally all over the world interacting with each other about all the elements. I blog about something and link to material, and then people talk about it because people are studying this in their own way all over the world. The main website that I have, I don't update very much, but I've got a lot of the evidence, original, valuations and analyses of things. So really, to come at people and to say, look, this stuff here, all these people, I've tried to get them to, no, nobody wants to talk about this. They want to go out there and pretend that something else is happening because they've got books and things they want to sell or whatever. And it's just time to make that statement so that this, which can be viewed online and people can say, and then they can challenge if they want to, they can question, they can say that I'm crazy, and I say, fine, well, let's prove it. Let's have evidence, because I don't care if there's 50 or 100 genuine so-called contactees. Great. I don't know what else we need to get from extraterrestrials that these folks haven't given or facilitated with Billy Meier. What else do we need? We have, in the Meier case, there's probably, by this time, there's probably about 28,000 pages of information. Only maybe 6,000 or 7,000 have been translated into English. His books are unbelievable because they're so logical. You learn to think. You say, wow, I think I can, what if I do this in my life? What if I take this thing and test it? Because there's no beliefs. It's like, if you get an element of the spiritual teaching, it's like, I want to study electronics. Well, I want to study car repair. You get a book. Okay, it says I put wire A, better put it there. Did it work? It worked. Go on to the next chapter. That's what the spiritual teaching is and should be for us. Not that we believe and start to follow things and people. It certainly isn't about Billy Meier. He's not going to be here forever. He's done his gig. And it's not about the folks. They did their gig. They gave us this stuff. So at this point, if you do have questions or challenges, there's nothing you can say that I would be offended by. Not that you'd have to care if I was offended. But this is for you to think about if you want. I know that Joe's going to get this put up online so that we can, have that to